A few months back, I let Erin, my wife, set a challenge for me to include any ingredient she wanted in a gin, and she chose seaweed. I was flying by the seat of my pants, so I just threw some nori sheets into the recipe, and it actually worked really well. Part of me kind of regrets doing it so quickly, so I'm going to test a few ingredients to see if we can improve on that gin. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, this is Still It, and today I'm going to mess around distilling a couple of different kinds of seaweed. I don't exactly regret using the nori. It turned out great. The gin was pretty damn good, but perhaps it could be better. I didn't test the seaweed, I just grabbed it and used it on a whim. I also have absolutely nothing against using ingredients from any part of the world. It's not a big issue to me, as long as they taste good. But sometimes it is nice to use things that are grown locally and sourced locally, as both of these are. What are they going to taste like in a gin? I have absolutely no idea, and that's what we're going to figure out today. I could, of course, just make 2 more gins and throw some of this and some of this in each of them and see how it turns out, but I'd like to kind of dissect this a little bit more. So I'm going to do 2 separate distillations, one with solely the New Zealand giant kelp flakes in it, and the other solely with the New Zealand wakame flakes in it. The idea here is to try and, well, completely isolate just this ingredient and see if there is a difference between A and B, to see which I prefer, to see which suits a gin better for my personal tastes. So here we have the 2 pot stills set up, each with 500 mils of neutral spirit in the bottoms of them, which have been preheated. And I'm going to dose each with a relatively high, I don't know, amount of seaweed, 1 in each, so we can, try and prize this thing apart. First up is the New Zealand giant kelp with 8 grams. You know what? Actually, after looking at that, let's just make it an even 10, because why not? Like I said, we're not sure how this is going to turn out. We're just, we're rolling with it. And let's go with the same. Pop that in there. I will stick the lids on this and let it sit for probably an hour and a half while we have dinner, get the kids to bed, come on back out here and we'll fire these distillations up. These macerated for about 2 hours while I did the family thing. We're back. This one has just fired up and I expect this one to do so anytime now. We're going to do the same thing as normal with a thing like this. Interesting. And take a very small amount off the top, just to deal to any weirdness that's going to pop up. And then, let's just prop that up a little bit so it goes in the right spot. And then collect the rest to see how it tastes. Obviously this isn't an exact sort of A-B, oh, there we go, it's just fired up. It's not an exact A-B comparison because of the 2 different types of still. The slight extra reflux on this side may have some effect. I'm hoping it's still going to let the, the actual flavors of the seaweed shine through though, so we can really pick which one we want to use. I'll make sure I'm taking roughly the same amount off the top. That looks about right. Oh, and by the way, team, I've bypassed the automatic 4 shots collection by just filling it up to start with. So we're taking that out of the equation. Once again, just trying to compare sort of apples with apples here as best we can. All right, let's let these things run. I'll taste throughout because I'd like to know when the different flavors from the seaweed come over. If they come out different during the run, I guess we just settle in and see what's happening. I'll be honest with you, these taste almost identical right now and I don't taste any seaweed. I'm hoping the seaweed comes more towards the tails, which kind of makes sense, but we'll see. The giant kelp distillation just dipped down to around about 50% ABV and the flavor dropped right out. So I've knocked that on the head and stopped it. This one is heading that way. I assume it's a few minutes behind. Still a bit of flavor. It is definitely starting to taper off now though. So I'll keep an eye on this one. We'll get these bottled up, proofed down, back down to, let's say 45% ABV. Let them sit overnight and we can taste them next to each other. So here we have it. We've got the giant kelp on this side, the New Zealand Wakame on this side. I guess we have a sniff first, shall we? So this smells sweet and slightly like plant-basedy, like leafy almost, which is kind of interesting. It doesn't instantly remind me of seaweed, that's for sure. It does have just a hint of something kind of ocean-like to me. And I can't quite put my finger on it. It isn't briny, it's not like salty. It isn't fishy. Maybe it is just the smell of kelp, I guess. Like walking along the beach. Yeah, it reminds me of kind of walking along pristine, rocky New Zealand beach, which is probably, it probably is the smell of kelp in the air, because that would make sense. That's where you find a lot of kelp in New Zealand. Interesting. Okay, this one. Whoa. Okay. That is a lot more pungent. Oh, okay. I need to say a huge, huge thank you to the Patreons. Thank you so much, Patreons, being the people that support us day in, month out. We thoroughly freaking appreciate it. I've heard you. There are reports that some of the new Patreons' names aren't showing up in the credit roll. I'm going to manually fix that for this video. And if any of you think that you're still being missed out, make sure to contact me over on the Patreon platform and we'll get it sorted out. Sorry guys, this happens from time to time. I can't figure out why, but I'll make it right for you. I don't know if I'm into that. It smells familiar. I can't, seal colony. It smells like a freaking seal colony. Wow. That pungent, almost like meat meets fish kind of vibe. It's super pungent and has a marine-like quality to it for sure. But it's almost like mammal sweat as well. All right, I guess let's taste it. Excited to taste this. Not so much that. Okay, it actually does have aspects of that, but dialed way down. It has an interesting sweetness to it, an interesting kind of like plant-like, maybe somewhere between grassy and spinachy aspect, and just a hint of that seal funk. I can do that. That's interesting. This one scares me. But I do have to preface all of this by saying that I have a strange aversion to most seafood. I'll eat and enjoy most things, but seafood is kind of sketchy to me. So maybe I have a bias against this. Hold on. For science, I guess. Oh. Okay. The flavor is not as pungent and sweaty as the aroma. It's very similar to this actually on the flavor, but it's a lot more intense and it is more pungent and herby rather than kind of light and sweet, if that makes sense. I don't dislike it as much on the palate as I do on the nose. Yeah, I don't like the nose at all. Yuck. So right now, if I had to pick one, I would go with this. But what I think I should probably do is test this in some gin. And I unfortunately don't have any of my gin or base gin here. Does anyone else have this strange phenomenon where you make gin, you bottle it up, and then the bottles are just empty? It's very strange. Anyway, what I do have is I hunted around and had a look at what commercial gins I had around. Hold on. So this is Billy Stitch, an interesting new gin out of Western Australia, which I've had the privilege to try. Thanks for sending it over to me, dude. This, neither by themselves are particularly close to to the profile of gin that I would like to put with the seaweed, but I think mixing them together might not be a terrible idea. That's actually not too far off. It's got more cardamom than I would use, but it's very nice. So yeah, if you get to see these, give them a nudge. Cool bottles, eh? Anywho, let's divide this up and we'll mix a little bit of the seaweed in and see how we go. Interesting, okay. All of the botanicals, the freshness, the lightness of the botanicals seems to dial that like seal stink, the seal funk way down. Interesting. Okay, so this almost lifts the brightness and it makes it lighter, almost sweeter overall. This does the opposite. It drags it down and makes it not muddy, not muted, but just kind of heavier and more dense. And I don't think either of those are particularly wrong. It just depends what you're going for, obviously. Let's style this up a little bit more. I'll put a little bit more in here. That's actually really good. It's dialing up the sweetness and the lightness, but it's also adding a little bit of an umami undertone to it. Kind of getting that weird interplay of sweet and savory, which is what I was hoping for in a seaweed gin. That even more so. This is turning into like the Isle of Scotch drinkers gin. It's funny, every like third or fourth time I smell it, I get that seal funk stench. And then it kind of goes away again. I'm really torn on this, guys, because this is a gin, as a gin, like a traditional gin, is just better, I think. But also, if you're going to put an ingredient into something, it kind of seems a little bit pointless sometimes to me when, you know, there's something labeled on the bottle, but you can't even pick it out. You can't taste it, and it doesn't seem to change the product at all. This definitely does that. You can tell that there's something in there that's different. Do I want a seaweed gin to be different? I don't know. I guess I need to think about this a little bit more and really try and imagine what I want the seaweed gin to be. Like, who's going to drink it? Who's going to love it? Who's going to be offended by it? And how you drink it. Is it a sipping gin? Is it a gin and tonic gin? Is it a dirty martini gin? So, if you have suggestions on what this gin should eventually turn into, there'll be a link down there, obviously, for the original seaweed gin episode, so you can get acclimatized if you don't know what's going on. But if you have suggestions on what this could potentially turn into, I'd love to hear it from you. If you've played with seaweed before, I'd love to hear from you, especially if you're using different varieties, strains, whatever you call it, from around the world. That would be quite interesting. But I need to ponder on this a little bit longer and decide exactly what direction we're taking this, because it's a bit of an interesting. But I need to ponder on this a little bit longer and decide exactly where we're going to take this. Anyway, I'll catch you guys next time. Keep on chasing the craft. See ya.